All right, let's talk about something I think we all feel. Ever feel like you're just drowning in information, but somehow you're still thirsty for real wisdom? It's a huge paradox, right? We've got data coming out of our ears, but our actual understanding of the world, it often feels, well, shattered into a million tiny pieces. So, in this explainer, we're going to go on a quest to see how we might just put those pieces back together. I mean, just think about it for a second. We have specialists for literally everything: quantum physics, ancient philosophy, you name it. But here's the kicker. How often do those worlds actually talk to each other? Not very often, right? And that separation, well, it creates these massive blind spots. It's like we're all holding different pieces of a giant puzzle, but nobody's looking at the box to see the whole picture. So today, we're going to tackle this head on. We're going to explore three really powerful answers to this one big question, and they come from totally different schools of thought. We'll dive into ethical technology, philosophical science, and something called integrative theory to see if we can maybe find a common path forward. Okay, so first things first, let's really nail down the problem. The sources we're digging into today have a name for this. They call it the modern knowledge crisis. And the key thing to get is that it's not about a lack of facts. We've plenty of those. It's about a lack of connection between them. Modern thinking has this habit of drawing lines in the sand, creating these huge divides. We're sort of trained to separate science from philosophy, our reason from our spirit, the objective world out there from our own subjective experience in here. And what does that do? It creates these brilliant experts who are absolute rock stars in their own little lanes, but they really struggle to see the bigger picture. And wow, this quote from one of our sources just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? The greatest crisis in modern thought is not a lack of knowledge, but our inability to unite the knowledge we possess. It perfectly captures the problem. The challenge isn't about gathering more data. It's about building bridges between the mountains of data we already have. So the real question is, how do we start building? All right, let's get into our first potential answer. This one comes from a really fascinating place: the intersection of cutting-edge technology and, traditional wisdom. The whole idea is that we need to build our innovations on a much deeper ethical and spiritual foundation. So the core concept here, and this is drawn from Islamic scholarship, is something called technology ilahiyah, which translates to divine technology. Now hold on, this isn't about rejecting modern tech at all, far from it. It's about a complete paradigm shift. It's about asking not just, hey, what can we build, but more importantly, what should we build? It's about embedding a moral compass, a true north, right into the DNA of our innovation process. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. We have this ancient ethical framework, the Maqasid Syria, and what's amazing is how incredibly relevant it is to our most modern problems. Just look at this table. It lays out these core objectives, these core principles. So, for example, preservation of intellect. That's a direct call to create tech that fights misinformation. How timely is that? Or preservation of life. That guides us toward better medical tech. And preservation of wealth points us to building fairer digital economies. It's not just a list. It's a whole ethical toolkit for guiding innovation so that it actually serves people. Okay, let's shift gears and look at our second answer, which kind of builds on this. This perspective argues that science, for all its incredible power, simply cannot exist in a vacuum. It absolutely needs philosophy to ask the bigger, tougher questions. And who better to put this into words than Einstein himself? Science without philosophy is lame. Philosophy without science is blind. He just summed it up perfectly. Science gives us the what, right? The data, the observations, how the universe works. But philosophy? Philosophy gives us the why, the context, the meaning, the ethical questions. They're two sides of the same coin. They absolutely need each other to get anywhere meaningful. So, what's crucial to understand is that the philosophy of science isn't just some dusty, abstract debate for academics. No way. You can think of it like the operating system that science itself runs on. It forces us to ask these massive, foundational questions you see here. How do we even know what we claim to know? Are our methods actually sound? And maybe the most important one of all, what are our ethical responsibilities as scientists and innovators with all this power we're unlocking? And this back and forth, this conversation, it's not new at all. I mean, look at this timeline. The dialogue between how we know and what we know has been evolving for centuries. It goes all the way back to Aristotle and his focus on observation, right through to the 20th century with thinkers like Popper and Kuhn,
completely reshaping how we think about scientific progress. It's a constant and, honestly, a necessary negotiation.
And that brings us to our third and final answer for today. This one is a framework designed specifically to tear down those walls that modern thought has so carefully built. The argument here is that the problem isn't just that our subjects are separate, it's that our very way of thinking is split down the middle. Right at the heart of this is a direct challenge to what's called Cartesian dualism. You know, that famous split between the mind and the body, the subject and the object? We can pretty much thank the philosopher René Descartes for that. Well, integrative theory comes along and says, nope, that's a false choice. Instead of mind versus body, it talks about embodied cognition, the wild idea that our thinking is literally shaped by our physical bodies. And instead of some detached objective observer, it says we are always participants in the very systems we're trying to study. So this entire approach is built on the principles of holism. And if there's one key takeaway here, it's this. You can't understand a system by just staring at its individual parts in isolation. It just doesn't work. New, completely unpredictable properties, think about consciousness in the brain. They emerge from the incredibly complex dance of all the components together. Everything is connected. The whole is truly, truly greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so let's take a step back. We've got 3 different answers on the table. One from ethics and theology, another from the philosophy of science, and a third from social theory. They seem pretty different, right? But what happens when we put them all together?
What's really incredible is that even though they come from totally different places, they are all pointing in the exact same direction. They're all pushing us to do the same things, to unite our reason with our spirit, to build an ethical compass right into our work, to finally tear down those false walls between disciplines, and at the end of the day, to move from just having a pile of fragmented facts to possessing real, integrated wisdom.
And let's be clear, this isn't just some academic daydream. This quest for unity has huge, real-world consequences. We're talking about how we design ethical AI that actually aligns with human values. We're talking about creating schools that teach students how to think across different subjects, not just in silos. This is basically a practical roadmap for finding our way and finding meaning in this incredibly complex world we live in. So, I want to leave you with this one final question to chew on. In your own life, in your work, in your studies, what's one bridge you can build? What's one connection you can make between 2 worlds of knowledge that seem totally separate? Because this whole quest for unified knowledge, it doesn't just happen in old books or university halls. It happens with every single one of us, every time we make one of those connections.